Good morning. It's time to go live. All right. It is Thursday, May 8th, 2025, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, broadcasting live from Austin, Texas. And my name is Keith. Welcome to the stream. I have been streaming Monday through Friday since the beginning of the year. It's been a little experiment I've been running. I won't say it's been super successful, but I knew it was kind of niche to start off with. So our stream is designed. Why is that? Okay. Our stream is designed to be a hangout for people in the job search who are getting up every day. Maybe they were laid off in the last 6 months or so, and they're struggling to find some consistency. It's hard to keep pushing things out in the world and not getting a lot of feedback back. But I created the stream. It's just to be a hangout. There's some place you can check in every morning while you're getting those apps out. Listen to me talk about what's going on in tech, both in the job space, but also in the wider tech world. I'm also open to any conversation. So if you have something you'd like to share, I've been a professional developer for over 30 years, and I am happy to chat about any and all of that stuff. My current day job is to manage a coding school where I teach people up to upskill in tech, and that is my focus. So we do two things on the stream. We look at job posting data, and we look at news stories. So let's get right into that job posting data. Let's start off here. So what we've got here is more than a year's worth of data I've been collecting. I've been collecting this data for almost 3 years, and this is sort of entry-level JavaScript developer jobs. And the goal is to really give us a sense, a trend line of where things are going in tech and specifically in the web space. I started out with entry-level developers because that was our business model at my day job, just to focus on getting new people into the industry. And we can see in the last 7 days, there's been a nice upward trend line, but you really got to kind of pull out to see the real story. So in the last 6 months, we'll see that upward trend line is really just digging us out of a hole that we were in. Yeah. So, a week ago, we sort of hit bottom after all the trade tariff stuff. And now we're slowly creeping up, but it kind of crested yesterday, it looks like. We'll see. Only time will tell. But if we look back at the full year, we'll see that we're down, I don't know, probably 30%, 35% on the number of job postings in the last year ago this time. So that factors in any kind of seasonal issues that might be there. And since the beginning of the year, I have been breaking down in a more granular way the data about JavaScript developers. So this is all JavaScript developer roles. Since the beginning of the year, we've seen that number's been relatively flat. It took a pretty significant dip because of the tariff stuff, and now it's starting to climb back up. The red line here is the remote jobs. You can see that while these echo, it is not as strong. So the remote jobs, while they're essentially following the similar trend, they are just not as volatile. They're fairly a lot more consistent. If we look at experience level and factor that in for entry level, mid level, and senior level roles, the entry level role here is in blue, the mid level is in red, and the senior level is in yellow. You see again that senior level and entry levels have not been affected as much, but there are a lot more mid level roles, and we're seeing a lot more kind of up and down roller coaster volatility there. If we look at remote roles only, broken down by experience level, we'll see a similar patterns there. But the interesting thing to understand is, like, if you're looking for a remote entry level or senior level role, That has been very consistent throughout the year so far in our 4 months in the first quarter. There is a trend line down in the mid-level roles, but that's interesting. I've been talking about this for a while, that the senior level roles make perfect sense, in the sense that, if you are senior level, you've been doing this for a long time, you figured out how to manage your time, you're good at working remotely or working on your own, and meeting your deadlines. There's generally a little bit more leeway in letting you be in an environment where you're most productive. Mid-level roles, they still got a lot to learn. There's a better it's better experience for them to be around more developers, to learn from them, to learn the systems, and to look for opportunities in their career to grow. The entry level one's kind of interesting, because entry level remote, I don't know. It'd be interesting to do a breakdown on those to see what kind of companies were hiring for those positions. Again, it's not a lot of numbers, but we're seeing roughly about 50 new job postings a day for entry level remote workers across the whole United States. All right, so those are the job numbers. The other thing I do is I hang out on LinkedIn a lot. There's a QR code on the screen. If you have not connected with me on LinkedIn, feel free to do that. Always looking to grow my network of people working in the tech space, specifically if you're a programmer, but not necessarily. I have a vast network of designers and UX people and other tech related roles in my larger group. But one of the reasons I stick around here is the LinkedIn news feed, because they have often good, pertinent stories that are frequently updated. We see that this was updated 9 minutes ago. Tell us that the Fed holds rates and warns of risks. So the Federal Reserve, met yesterday. The anticipation, and we talked about this yesterday, was that they were not going to lower rates and they weren't going to raise rates. And that is what ended up happening. The Federal Reserve left the interest rates unchanged Wednesday as expected, warning that tariffs had raised the risk of faster inflation and slower growth. The third consecutive meeting, central bank rates held between 4.25 and 4.5. The Fed, which lowered borrowing costs 3 times last year, faces the prospect of the levies reigniting price growth, at least temporarily, or weighing on a softening job market. My gut tells me the uncertainty about the path of the economy is extremely elevated, Fed Chair Powell said. It follows calls by President Trump to support growth by cutting rates. So yeah, again, no surprises here. They've got a thread and needle, and that needle right now that everybody's starting to talk about, you're hearing more in the press, is stagflation, where prices are going up, but they still cannot lower the interest rate. Normally, if you have inflation, you lower the interest rate, and there's more borrowing, there's more stuff going on. Companies are able to grow, companies are able to access money. They can take more risks, and prices tend to go down. But if you have inflation, but a soft job market, that balancing act, that sort of Jenga tower of the economy that we play around with there, is hard to determine kind of which block to pull out without dropping the whole thing down. So they have to be very cautious. But in the short term, it definitely would help us if the rates went down. He's got a different goal. So he's making his decisions differently. The fastest growing roles for grads, I've got a senior in college who, well, she'll be a fourth year in college with the senior terms get a little mushy there in college, but she'll be a fourth year college student in the fall. And I've got a new son starting college in the fall. Not a new son, but a son as a new college student starting in the fall. So the idea of what the job market is going to look like in the next few years is something I am tracking very closely. So where are today's grads getting hired? LinkedIn's annual grad guide highlighted the fastest growing jobs, industries, and cities for recent grads. Tech and business roles dominate the list for those with bachelors, while durable fields such as construction, utilities, and top destinations for entry-level opportunities. Read the full report to learn more. Let's see, what does it say? Fastest growing job titles for new grads: artificial intelligence engineer, law clerk, interesting, data center technician, system engineer, financial planning and analysis specialist. That's interesting. Business development representatives, always need biz dev, administrative analyst, product associate, service desk specialist, and clinician. That's a general term. I don't know what that means. Is it just a doctor? Is that? I don't know what that means. A lot of STEM in there, a lot of tech in there for sure. Fastest growing industries for new grads: construction, utilities, oil, gas, mining, financial services, wholesale, entertainment providers, administrative and support services, real estate, professional services, and education. I don't see tech on there. But really everybody's tech, right? You don't find any of these corners of the business world that isn't touched by tech for sure. In terms of industries. Interesting. What else have we got? Fastest growing cities for new grads: San Antonio, Dallas, Tucson, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Houston, Tallahassee, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Virginia Beach, and Savannah, Georgia. Interesting. 3 of the top 10 are in Texas, but Austin is not one of them. We're not really big enough, probably. But we do have a lot of colleges here. Interesting. Fastest growing cities. What to do next? Say yes more often. Not every new grad will land their target role right away, and that's completely normal. When you're early in your career, say yes to 75% of opportunities and no to 25%. Focus on people, not just job titles. I always say that. That is part of the advice I always give. Lead with your skills, not your major. I also say that. Make networking specific and ongoing. This is not one that's easy for me, and it's not easy for a lot of people, but I always mention that. Bring in the energy. This is the thing, that I often say is, there's often this advice: you got to fake it till you make it. And one of the things that I always say is there's only one thing you really should fake, and that is enthusiasm. If you're faking technical skills, you're going to be found out pretty quickly. And then you're just a faker. But if you're not super enthusiastic about a role, but you're looking for a job, that's a thing you can fake. And generally speaking, you bring up the energy, you're going to be more memorable. People will like you more. Good stuff there. Interesting. My computer crashed right before the stream was about to begin. I had to reboot. Rushed through it. I had the wrong microphone, so hopefully it sounded okay. U.S. and U.K. reach a trade deal. President Trump said Thursday he had struck a deal with the UK, marking the first major agreement of its kind since tariffs were imposed. The White House will hold a press conference at 10 a.m. Eastern time, where the framework is expected to be announced. Trump said in a social media post that the deal is a full and comprehensive one. Meanwhile, the EU may institute retaliatory tariffs on over $100 billion of U.S. imports if its own trade talks don't progress. Well, I'm sure the markets will be happy to hear about that. But the devil is in the details. Apple mulls AI search shift. Apple is considering reworking its Safari web browser to focus, quote unquote, on AI-powered search options over standard ones such as Google. The revelation came from Eddie Q, Apple's chief of services, who also noted that Safari searches dropped for the first time last month, likely thanks to the increased use of AI. Q was testifying as part of the Justice Department's lawsuit against the Google parent Alphabet, which could ultimately undo the $20 billion a year deal that has long kept Google as the default search tool in Safari. Well, and then, what AI company do they make their deal with? This is one of the interesting things. Is Apple going to finally jump in and start building their own models, which there's been hints of that, but by and large, their feeling was to not spend all that money developing models and just to make deals with the best ones in the same way they made deals with Google. So let all these other companies spend all this money and fight it out, and then whoever emerges as the winner, and then we'll just pick them and pay them money. And we de-risk that whole process. So it's interesting. Spotify's new effort versus YouTube. Spotify has released several tools that give users more control over their listening sessions in a bid to narrow the gap with rival YouTube. The latest updates include features for easier music discovery and playlist customization. While YouTube continues to dominate the podcasting space, Spotify has also introduced a new metric dubbed plays, quote unquote, that displays the number of times an audio only or video podcast has been actively listened to or streamed. I am not a Spotify person. They started out as a music platform, and music is not a thing I spend a whole lot of time listening to. My day job is knowledge work, and that knowledge work for me is hard to do when there's music in the background. It's specifically music with lyrics. I like to put a little trip hop instrumental stuff on or something like that. Even EDM if I'm in the mood to kind of get my blood pumping. But I do not listen to music very much. I just don't. And when I go for walks around the neighborhood, I listen to audiobooks. I'm about halfway through a really good one right now. Let's see what we got. Toyota braces for $1.3 billion tariff hit. What a difference a year makes. Last May, Toyota notched its highest annual profit of any Japanese company ever. Now it's projecting a decline of about a fifth. A big driver of that change, U.S. tariffs, which Toyota expects will eat $1.3 billion in profits in April and May alone. Cars and car parts are Japan's top export to the U.S., but the new 25% tariff makes the future of the industry difficult to forecast, quote unquote. Yeah. Yep. BlackRock ups its return to office order to 5 days It's back to the office full-time for 1,000 managing directors at BlackRock as the multinational investment company tightens rules around office attendance for the first time since 2023. Anonymous sources tell the Financial Times it's the latest indication that big financial institutions are cracking down on flexible work policies, following similar mandates by JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. The decision reflects the desire to encourage collaboration. One source said junior staff will still be allowed to work remotely 1 day per week. Interesting. That is interesting. Managing directors have to be there full time, but the junior staff gets a flex day. That's kind of curious. I hadn't seen that twist before. Ford hikes prices on 3 models. Wednesday became one of the first. Ford became one of the first big automakers to adjust prices in the face of the new tariffs, announcing an increase on 3 of its Mexico-made models: the Mustang Mach-E electric SUVs, the Bronco Sport SUVs, and Maverick pickups manufactured after May 2nd will be subject to price hikes of up to $2,000, while tariffs imposed by the Trump administration have roiled the auto industry. Ford finds itself uniquely suited to weather the storm due to its strong manufacturing foothold in the U.S. Yeah, I mean, a $2,000 bump on the price is not horrible. I mean, they were forecasting $9,000 to $11,000 extra added to a vehicle. Yeah. We read a story yesterday that some of the people who rushed out and bought a car before the tariffs were going to be imposed. Got a question here. Let's see what this says. Put this on. How's that work? Hey, Keith. I'm based in Chicago, and I've been hearing a lot of people in the creative tech world worry about whether they will not be able to keep their jobs. Tech companies have apparently been cutting some of their staff because of AI developments, no longer needing certain roles. And I've also talked with a number of software engineers who recently finished college and are struggling to find work. All this despite the fact that Chicago is becoming a growing tech hub. What advice do you have for young folks today, and what they should do to pivot or stay afloat in a challenging market? So, real. How does that work? Let me hide that for right now. Hey, thanks for the question, Charles. So I work with a lot of people, some breaking into the industry, many who have been laid off, and I'm saying to them, there's a couple of things. There's a very long version. I could do an hour-long chat about this thing, but the short version is that we've got a lot of headwinds in tech right now, right? The economy is a big part of it, right? This is completely separate than the AI issue. The fact that right now businesses can't forecast, what their profits are going to be like in any reasonable way. They can't see a path to growth. That means that they're just circling the wagons and they're holding off on hiring. They're backfilling roles that are lost, but they're not growing. And that is, right now more significant sort of headwind than the AI problem. The AI problem is real, absolutely something you need to pay attention to, but understand that if this tariff stuff goes away, if things, calm down from a national standpoint, and business feels more comfortable that they can grow. We saw this at the end of last year. The election happened, and there was a lot of enthusiasm around what the new administration meant to business. They thought it meant it was going to be lower taxes, it was going to be easier mergers and acquisitions, M&A, and they thought it was going to be lower regulation, right? Like all those three things would be, would be good for, and they also thought that interest rates were going to go down too. Like those four things, if they had happened, like everybody anticipated they were going to happen, um, we would have a humming economy right now. We wouldn't be seeing these numbers as drastic as they are, right? That's not the way things have played out. But you can see here in this graph from the last year that right around the election, right around here, we were going into the holiday season. Holiday seasons don't normally look like this. Going into November and Thanksgiving and December, um, there's not a spike. Everything kind of dips in terms of hiring typically, but we did not see that. We saw a lot of enthusiasm for business because they thought, hey, happy days are here again. This new administration is going to unleash business. We're going to be able to really grow next year. And so they started hiring in anticipation of that, right? And then what happened? We had there's always a dip in that week before uh, New Year's and Christmas. And then the inauguration happened. And then our new president started signing all those signing statements, executive orders, right? And then they're like, oh, wait, what's going on? A lot more uncertainty. Every day he was just signing new things. What does this mean for business? We don't know. Let's check this out. We got to talk about this. We got to figure this all out. And so that crazy growth that was happening in the fall just flattened out, right? So we'll get to the AI stuff in a second, but I just want to underscore the point that these headwinds have nothing to do with tech, and they have everything to do with the larger financial world. And that is companies' ability to forecast what the next quarter is going to look like, what the next year is going to look like, determines how much they grow and how much they hire. So, big headwind right there, right? You have no control over that whatsoever. Like you can call your congressman, to drop in the bucket. I don't know. That doesn't help at all, right? We got no control over that, right? AI is a different question, right? So let's talk about AI real quick. Um, what is AI good at? How is AI trained? And how is it going to affect certain segments um, of the tech space, right? So obviously, AI is just a catch-all term for a lot of different kinds of machine learning, primarily, right? And so when we think of AI, we're thinking of text-based AI. We're talking about image-based AI. We're talking about machine learning, being able to take data, large, vast amounts of data, and create graphs and charts, and determine uh, uh, pull out information that's useful and actionable from large amounts of data. All those things are going to have a huge effect on how we in the tech world do business, right? But understand that um, the image models are a little different, but with the LLMs, they're trained on a large corpus of data, and that data, in terms of the quality of that data, is like a bell curve, right? Lots of really crappy, bad data in there. Bulk of it is just sort of average data that everybody sort of put out on the internet, right? And then there's a smaller percent of that that's put out by high quality stuff. But it is predictive in its nature, right? The thing that is seen the most is the thing that's most confident is the correct answer. So that means that middle is the part that it often gives you, right? So you ask for a thing and it says, hey, the most likely answer is this based on the billions of data points that I've seen. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you that best information, because that is just as suspect as the worst information because it hasn't seen as much of it, right? So what does that mean? Well, it means for us, if like myself, I've been working as a professional developer for over 30 years, right? I have a lot of experience. My experience tends to be on the higher end of that. And while there I can get a lot of benefit out of utilizing AI. Um, there are things that I know that I'm still going to be better at than the AI. Again, not that it hasn't seen information that's even better than me. It has. It's just not as likely going to give that information up, right? So if you've been working, if you've developed expertise, if you got your 10,000 hours, you're in pretty good shape, right? But if you're trying to break into this industry, if you don't have a whole lot of experience, that is going to be more challenging, no doubt about it, right? I've been working with a lot of people who are trying to break into the industry, and um, and the thing to understand about getting that job is that your everybody is um, everybody assumes that especially in tech, that the technical aspect of the job interview is the most important part, and it's absolutely not, especially if you're breaking in, right? Um, what they know is what they need is somebody that they is going to fit on their team, that can learn, that can be reliable, and that can bring a little bit something extra to the table, right? And so how you present yourself in that is going to determine a lot about whether you start to get those callbacks. So the process of looking for a job right now is no different than it used to be, but it definitely, because there are less roles out there and there are more people who've been laid off recently, especially with more experience than you, you need to, make sure that you're spending time looking at and improving, the way you present yourself as much as possible, right? In terms of like what does hiring mean long term for these different things, again, I'm a coder. I write a bunch of text, and that's how I make my living. And LLMs have gotten very good at that because, again, there's lots of data for them to mine, and I find it very useful to utilize AI. Right? It's not solving the big problems, but it's taking away a lot of the drudgery work that I have to that I've done, that I normally have to do, and it speeds up my process. So certainly, you're I wouldn't be the first person that you hear it from, but that is like embrace these tools. Like when you're in school, your job is to learn and get your grades and graduate. But as soon as you get that graduation behind you, your job is to become the most productive, functional employee that you can be. And right now, that means learning AI tools and optimizing your output with those AI tools. So, don't think that you're going to be John Henry beating the machine. You're not, right? You have to learn these tools. It's still in the nascent stages of these tools. There's still a lot to learn, um, and you need to stay on top of that. So your education does not finish when you get that diploma. Your education is sort of just beginning of like what it takes to hold a job and keep a job in this new future that we're stepping into, right? So um, focus on the human. Focus on spending a lot of time with these AI tools to figure out what they're good at and what they're not good at, right? Lean into the things that make you unique and interesting, and always be working on side projects. This is a thing that I can't say enough. I talk to college graduates very regularly, and the first question that I always have is like, "What are you working on right now?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm just trying to get a job." I'm like, "All right, but you any side projects you're working on? You building your portfolio? If you're a programmer, if you're a designer, if you're a UX person, if you're a data scientist, you know, one of these, people, any of these roles, when they're out looking for a job, one of the things employers are looking for is like, are they just seat fillers? Are they just looking for a paycheck? Yeah, maybe they're smart. They'll do what I ask. But are they going to go that extra mile? Do they really love this stuff? Is a thing in their spare time when they've got nothing else directing them to do that they're actually spending time working on developing themselves and becoming better and more of an expert in this process, right? I think really the days of having a job that is not necessarily your calling, but you're smart enough to do it, and you go in and do your job. Those days are coming to an end, right? What we're going to find, especially in these technical roles, including design, including video editing, including all of these creative jobs that seem to be at threat from AI. The people who are going to win are the people who are obsessed about this stuff, because they're just going to find stuff, right? They're going to go beyond that middle of the bell curve, um, you know, uh, content, and they're going to develop stuff that is interesting, unique, that is new, that is thought provoking, right? So, I'm always working on 3 or 4 different side projects. There's always one primary one that I'm working on, and then I've got, 2 or 3 other side projects that I'm working on. And I've been doing this for 30 years. Like, this is the stuff that gets me up in the morning. If I'm on vacation, I'm working on a side project. Like, it's just who I am. And, um, you know, when I started when I touched my first computer in the 80s, the person who was a computer scientist was the nerdiest of nerds, right? You couldn't almost have a conversation with them because they were so interested in this one thing that is so niche, right? Um, I think that we're going to be heading back to those days. We have to get back to where, we don't have to be, we're going to get back to this place where people who just sort of like it and are smart enough to do the work but aren't compelled by it, who are just fine with turning in that middle of the road work. Well, that middle of the road work will be functional and capable by somebody who's managing an AI, right? But how do you set yourself apart? How do you go beyond? How do you, what's the difference between the guy in the, guitar store who's just plinking around playing, Stairway to Heaven, and the person who's, rock star making, uh, the top of their at the top of their field? And that's because they're putting in the time. They're doing the work. They're devoting themselves to their career. And when you're young, when you're just getting out of college, that is the time. It's the time to experiment. It's the time to really go in. Start a company. Try and start a company, right? Once you start to build these skills. Um, I can't tell you a number of times where I've talked to employers and they said I hired the person because they, had a failed startup in their history. Because then they're thinking more about just the role, but they're also thinking about what the business is, right? Um, So there's a lot of different things to be said about this, but the main thing to say is AI definitely is going to be a disruption. It's a smaller disruption than the overall headwinds in the business industry, which could turn around, but we have no control over it. And you just need to spend time um, with your chosen profession. Find a love for it that is going to, again, what do you do on a Saturday and a Sunday? If you're a programmer like me, I'm more often than not writing a little bit of code. Doesn't mean I don't have a complete life. I got a wife and kids and 4 cars in the driveway, and I got a lot of things pulling on me. But at the back of my mind, I'm always working on what's that project I'm working on. What am I trying to solve there, right? And it's those kind of people that will transcend this sort of middle of the road AI output, and they will always be looking. Industry will always be looking for those kind of people who are leaders, who are devoted, who are um, pushing the boundaries, right? So find your way to be extraordinary in ways that you control, and work will find you, right? Like, those are the kind of short version. This is a great question, and I just did a long ramble, so I hope that helped a little bit. But we're getting kind of the end of it. Thanks, Charles. Welcome. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have not, feel free to continue the conversation offline. I'm going to wrap it up for right now, and I will be back in 23 hours and 20 minutes. Is that the way math works? And then we'll sort of wrap up our week here. Well, thanks again. I appreciate the question. And